Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
All right, we'd like to recognize the Provo Municipal Council and the Provo Library Board. This is a joint meeting. It is 5:31, Tuesday, July 23rd, 2024. We will do a roll call of everyone. To start out, we do have Gary Garrett online. We'll start over here with Brianne.
I'm the Adult and Teen Services Manager at the library.
Okay, we can just give names all around.
Joelle Bagshaw, Children's Services Mentor.
Jennifer Bruton.
Becky Bogdan.
Jenny Spadafora. Catrice McKay.
Rachel Whipple.
Megan Pechtel. George Hanley.
Cindy Gagan. Carla Gordon.
Anne Marie Marchand.
Justin Harrison. Brian Jones.
Nathan Moon.
Marilee Kenneth.
Kara Rothman.
Lisa Hill.
Leah. Rachel
Malia-
Breen.
Malia Daly.
Rachel Breen.
Jennifer Keys.
John Morgan.
All right. Oh, it's a public meeting. Only the presenters and those invited by the council may speak or ask questions, unless otherwise invited by the chair. Please wait to speak until called on by the council chair. Please be sure to limit side conversations and interfere with the audio recording. Just so you guys know, we just updated this room. So it is all, we don't have mics near us, but they work really well up in the ceiling. And they do pick up everything. So I suggest no side conversations. Oh, that's the next part. If you need to have a side conversation, please leave the room. All right, our first item of business, a presentation regarding the Provo City Library governance structure. And this was presented by our city attorney, Brian Jones. And Brian.
Thank you, Chairman Kay. Members of the council and library board, welcome. We had a better way to present this. The information is somewhat confusing because the state code itself is not very clear, very short. The entire state code on city libraries is 8 pages. So there's a lot that it doesn't really say, but I'm going to go through a few main points. Just in summary, I do have a staff member coming down in a few minutes with photocopies of city and state code regarding the library and library board that we will hand out for your reference. Anyway, so we'll go from there. So first comment that I'll make is that, you know, we have, first of all, an interesting situation because most of the cities in the state of Utah don't have our same form of government. The council mayor form of government is actually really rare in the state. So we have something that a lot of other cities don't to begin with, which is separation of powers between the council and the mayor. On top of that, then we also, in this particular instance, trebling the complexity, I guess, we also have a library board, which, although the library is part of the city and established by the city, has its own government structure. So I'm just going to briefly talk through some of that. So this is in Title 9, Chapter 7 of State Code, entitled City Libraries. It says a city's governing board may establish and maintain a public library. So the first thing that happens is that it's the council that decides whether a library should exist and whether it should continue to exist. Okay, so that's the first step of where it comes from. Once a council decides that the library should exist, it's up to the council to appoint a library board between 5 and 9 members from citizens. And one of those members can be a member of the governing board. Currently serves on the board. Members serve without compensation, that their expenses can be paid from library funds. Their terms are 3 years. They may not serve more than 2 consecutive terms. Annually, the directors are supposed to select a chairman and other officers of the board. And the council, as the city's governing body, may remove any director for, quote, misconduct or neglect of duty. And if there are vacancies, if there are midterm vacancies, then those are filled for the remainder of the term. So that tells us a little about how the library board comes to be to begin with. What does state code say about what they can do? So this is where it gets interesting. It says the library board of directors may, with the approval of the city governing body. Okay, so the following things in state code are powers of the library board, but only as approved by the city council. Have control of the expenditure of the library fund, the construction, lease, or sale of library buildings and land, and of the operation and care of the library, and purchase, lease, or sell land, purchase, lease, or erect buildings. In a separate section, so this next section does not talk about with the approval of the governing body. So the council approves the board's control of the expenditure of the library fund. That's the main point to take from the last paragraph. The next paragraph says that the library board shall maintain and care for the library, establish policies for its operation, and this is a fun one to try to figure out exactly what this means. In general, carry out the spirit and intent of the provisions of this part. So don't ask me. Okay, so then there's a provision that is really relevant to these proceedings that says all tax money received for the library shall be deposited in the city treasury to the credit of the library fund and may not be used for any purpose except that of the city library. These funds should be drawn on by the authorized officers of the city upon presentation of the vouchers of the library. Some of our archaic system today. Point being that the tax money that is dedicated to the library can only be spent for the library. And that has to do with one of the questions that came up in a previous meeting is, why is our library funded by a separate property tax fund where some other libraries in the state are funded through the general fund of their city or through a mixture of general fund and property tax? And we did some research. I had a lot of look at this. There's a long history dating back to the 1918, I think. There's a statute that led to a Utah Supreme Court case about library funds and property tax dedication. The short version of it, though, is that one of the methods of funding libraries has been to do it by property tax, precisely because of the reason just stated in the statute, which is that if you fund them that way, that money can't be spent for something else. So, the other option, if you do it out of the general fund, in some ways, there's pros and cons, right? As we talked about in some of our earlier meetings. If you fund the library out of the general fund, then the stresses get shared among all of the departments of the city, right? And the successes can be shared amongst all the departments of the city as well. But you don't have full control and full predictability over the future, because in any given year, a city council can completely reorganize how that goes. So, in 1 year, they might pass a property tax increase to the general operations fund of the entire city and share some of it with the library. They might even, not to suggest that anybody on this city council would do that, but they might even sell the property tax to the citizens by saying it's for the library. But because the property tax is going into the general operations fund, the next year they could turn around and give it to a different part of the city, right? Whereas if you have a property tax fund that is dedicated to the library, per the section that I just read, it can only be spent on the library fund. Now that doesn't mean, to address one of the questions that's also come up in some of our meetings, the fact that we do have a property tax fund that is dedicated to the library does not mean that that is the only place that money can come from. The city, particularly the city council, as they approve the budget, could, by the same token, convert it into one of these hybrid systems where there is a certain base threshold of funding that comes from property tax, but appropriate funds from general fund to also supplement this fund. Now, the pro side is they can do that. The con side is that then they can take it away later. Right. So anyway, any questions about any of that before we go any further? Okay. So let's just cover a few other basics. The library board of directors makes rules about the library, the governance of the library and the use of the library. It does, under state statute, is required use to be free to the inhabitants of the city where it's located. The library board must provide an annual report to
I have a question about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
When you mentioned the free, what's that line about free again?
So specifically, it says each library established under this part shall be free to the use of the inhabitants of the city where located, subject to the rules adopted by the library board. The library board may extend privileges and use of the library to persons residing outside of the city upon terms and conditions it may prescribe by rule. So library membership, for lack of a better word, must be free to Provo citizens. It can be given to other people, and they can be charged for it according to sites.
So hypothetically, they could be charged for certain services or things within the library.
Right, yes, exactly. And again, it says subject to rules adopted by the library board. So if there are certain services that the library board itself deems to not be core services, but to be extra services, things that are additional. For example, almost all libraries that I'm aware of that provide video rentals charge some kind of nominal fee for the video rental,
Right.
Which at least so far has not been challenged as being in violation of this rule. But the core service of being a member of the library,
Great. I'd like to recognize that Craig Christensen is also on Zoom.
welcome, Greg.
Join you. Thank you very much.
I'll try to not take too much time on the rest of this. So the next one I was getting to is that the library board must provide an annual report to the city council on the condition and operation of the library, including a financial statement, and provide an annual report to the state library board. The library board of directors appoints a person as librarian to have charge of the library and other personnel upon the recommendation of the library. So again, this is outside of the normal course of how we're used to things working in the city, where we treat the city librarian as a department director, but the librarian is not appointed by the mayor with the consent and advice of the council, like other department directors are. They're appointed by the library. There's a provision here that says donations are permissible and they have to be, some of the donations have to be used for the library. And then there's a couple of not very relevant provisions about how libraries can consolidate if they want. So you can merge different libraries. So that's what the state code says about libraries. The city code, which is in chapter 2.26 of the library board, contains mostly restatements of those same provisions, although there are a couple of interesting differences. So for instance, in 2.26.020, which talks about the establishment of the board, right after saying that only one member of the board can be a city councilor, there's a sentence that says, all directors shall be appointed by the mayor with the advice and consent of the municipal council for terms of 3 years. That in some ways is actually in conflict with what I just read a few minutes ago about state code. So you can either view that as you reconcile them by saying, well, state code says it's up to the city council to appoint the library board members, but in city code by their legislative authority, the city council has delegated that authority to the mayor, which they could revoke at any time and take back to themselves. Or you could read it as that's just contrary to city code, it shouldn't be working that way. I mean, to state code, it shouldn't be working that way. It should be the council that's actually making it. So that is one thing that probably merits a little discussion. Let's see. We're talking about vacancies and all of these other things are just. There is a provision here that says the library board appoints a secretary, which is not state code, so that's just an additional officer. There's some provisions here about how many meetings you can miss before you vacate your office. It's 3 years. So I think the only other provision that I wanted to mention is really different or added to the state code is that there's a provision here, and this just goes to the separation of powers. It's 2.26.090 that talks about board powers. It repeats the exact same things from state code about the library board being responsible to maintain and care for the library, establish policies, etc. It says the exact same thing about the council needing to approve control of expenditures. And then there's this interesting sentence, well, there's two interesting sentences actually, to say, except as set forth in this chapter or by resolution, all other administrative control in respect to the library is reserved to the mayor or the mayor's appointed designee. Again, I have to confess, I don't know what that means. There's a provision we just read a few minutes ago that said that the library board itself was responsible for, in general, carrying out the spirit of the law. But on top of that, it says anything that doesn't include is under the mayor's direction. Again, I don't know what that means. It means in many ways that one of the things that I often talk about, and I'm sorry for the digression, a lot of times in city council meetings, we talk a lot about separation of powers and the separation of powers between the council and the administration. And one of the things that I often like to quote is that there is a Utah Supreme Court decision penned by former Chief Justice Dallin Oaks on the issue of separation of powers, where he says essentially focusing too much on who can do what and who cannot do what is not an effective way to run any government. But what is really required for separation of powers to work is for the branches to work together. So that's usually my closing line about separation of powers, is that there are a lot of questions we can't really answer about if we really dig down about trying to define exactly who can and can't do what. The best thing to do is for everybody to try to make the city, and in this case the library, function as well as possible. The one other thing that I will say that is unique about city code or different, or in addition to the state code, is there's also a sentence here that says the library board shall act as an advisory board to the municipal council on all policy and budgetary matters pertaining to the library, and to the mayor in respect to the administrative powers reserved to the mayor under subsection 4. So the library board is actually an advisory board to both the council and the mayor, depending on the function that you're fulfilling. Clear as mud? Everybody now understands completely what their job is, right? Anyway, that's really all I can say, other than maybe trying to answer some specific questions if there are any, because that's all the state and city codes say about the structure.
Okay, any questions for Brian? All right, covered it, thank you.
Okay.
All right, next a presentation regarding the Provo City Library Building Management Plan. This is being presented by Carla Borden. And Travis Colvin is not here, but he is watching on YouTube right now. Erica Hill is joined us too.
Okay. And did Alyssa Hanson get her name? You snuck in.
I did something. Up first, or do you want
No,
So this one?
no, the PowerPoint.
We have this and then we haven't. Is that the
Is this the
presentation?
PowerPoint?
No. I think it's scroll. It might be. It's not.
Is this
Okay,
it?
that's it, that one, yeah.
Is this?
Just getting a heart attack. Thank you so much. All right, so I have a bunch of presentations. This is the first one. So this first one is about the building plan, which everyone's understandably worried about our building, but we did go through, put together a 5-year plan of what facilities have told us, what parts of the building will be reaching their end of life in the next 5 years, how much approximately those will pay. And then from the research that I've done on the exterior of the building, parking garage, some of those projects that will also need to be done in the next few years. So I'll go through this. I don't know how much detail you all have this piece of paper, so if you have questions from that, so we'll just talk through it. Please stop me and ask questions whenever you feel like it. So do I have control? Is that me? Okay. Excellent. So this coming year, we are going to be working on our gutters. The quote that we have for that is about $14,000. Next spring, we hope to do some work on replacing the joints in our parking structure. And that's gonna be about $86,000. And then we have a couple of smaller things, sidewalk sealing, and actually the metal door replacement is all kind of one project. We have water leaking into our underground parking and it's destroying a door. As soon as I can get that sealed up, we can get through the sidewalks. And so we talked to the concrete people to fix that. Quotes for about $20,000. We only have one. We'll be getting more, but at this point we're thinking about that much. And then there are a few smaller items that are coming to their end of life this year. It'll be like at your house where you know that your water heater is getting old. I do not plan on necessarily replacing these here. Talk with facilities and replace what needs to be replaced and keep an eye on them going forward. And that's kind of how I feel about most of this end of life stuff. These are the years when they should be getting old, but we had a UPS that they're supposed to last 15 years and we just replaced ours after 24. So if you can use it for longer, I feel like keep an eye on it, know how old it is, be ready to replace it, know that it is there. Don't replace something that's working just fine. I don't think. So this is kind of where the money for that is coming from. I know it's been pointed out that we did lower the amount of money in some of our building maintenance budgets. And I felt safe doing that because we are earning a lot more interest in our endowment now than we have been in the past. We just could go down, could do less, but for now, we're earning about $100,000 instead of about $10,000. It's a lot more, and I feel like that's gonna help us get through. So even with these projects that we have, by the end of this year, we'll still have $40,000 in that endowment fund that we can pull out. This year, we are putting $70,000 back into our ending fund balance from our capital expenses that we did not spend last year. Basically, when the chiller came due, we scrambled to get enough money to cover the PO, and then we were able to get some money from the endowment, and we didn't need to use all of it that we had pulled together. So it's basically savings that will go back into our ending fund balance. And I did just receive excellent news from John Morgan that their initial balancing of our budget for the year, initially it said we were gonna be at 1.3 million in our ending fund balance. And my goal was to keep it about 1.5 million, and we did do that. So the end of this fiscal year, we have 1.5 million, which is where I want to keep it. I don't want to go any lower than that. Partially so that we have money we can draw from on years when our building costs exceed what our budget is. Hopefully that makes sense. Any questions on for this year? Next year, the next 2 years, there's brick repair and brick sealing. There are some grants that I believe I can get based on talking to the State Historic Preservation Office. Those kinds of preservation and restoration projects are what it's easier to get grant money for. They felt confident we could get some help with that. I don't know how much yet because we're in early days. I kind of wonder if we can combine those together and do the project together because that can make it cheaper. But it depends on how the granting organizations like to split things up. There's a small parking structure project that needs to be done. We've got some things that are, this is actually a lighter year on things that might die on us, which is great. And And then, since we don't have a lot of stuff, hopefully, again, the grant will cover a lot of our outdoor things. One of the grants that we're working on right now is a matching grant for, they'll give us 20,000 if we spend 20,000, so I did put that in there as us matching that. And then, since we won't have a lot of other big expenses. However, if we do, if the grant, not all the grant money comes through, there's still money in that endowment fund to help us with those. Though I do plan on using it. We've got a big thing coming, we'll be dying here in a year or two. 27, again, that brick ceiling, if we can do that all in 1 year, I think it will overall be cheaper because getting lifts and things in to get to the whole structure, but it depends on what kind of grants we can get. The bell tower also needs to have some repairs on it. But that is, again, restoration kinds of projects, hoping that we can get some grants for that. This packaged air handlers, there's 4 of them. Those are gonna be expensive to replace. So this is a time going forward when we may have to pull out of a transfer from our ending fund balance, which is again why we wanna keep that at or around 1.5 million. So that we have money there that we can pull out on these years, and then we can set it aside on years when we don't have such a big expensive thing. Any questions? Fiscal year 28, I want to fix the front steps. Wearing away, and but they tell us we can get some sandstone that will actually wear better. But that is again a kind of project that historically it's part of the exterior of the building, so we'll hope to get some help with that. Possibly the grant, the matching 2020 grant could cover that as well. They said we can do multiple, that grant can be done on the building, multiple grant cycles. So that won't get in our way. I don't know what these things are, but they're on my list about needing to be replaced, so.
Electrical.
They're electricals. But still being able to cover a lot of that with our endowment, not needing to pull stuff out of our ending fund balance. And honestly, in the next year, 2029, I don't have anything hitting end of life at that point. We don't have anything, our blinds are starting to break. You've been in the ballroom. I haven't dared approach a blind person to tell me how much that's gonna cost to replace all of those, but we would be doing it in phases as we have money available. Those are the kind of things that I do have on my horizon. So that would be my 5-year building maintenance and repair. We're not building a building, so that's okay. This is basically what we have and what we need to look forward to having to. These are expenses we look forward to needing to cover. So that is basically my presentation on the building.
Right, any questions for Carla? Mr. Whipple.
So it looks like you have budgeted out these different expenses based on when things are anticipated to die. And also based on the idea that you'll have about $100,000 from interest every year to use on these expenses. Right now, we have great interest rates for earning interest, which is good. When the interest rates were lower, like I guess the fund balance was higher, so you were still able to get that much, or?
We did have these things coming to end of life. We had a new building. We just didn't have that much that would need to be repaired. So yes, they would pull out of that. They actually would let it build up multiple years and then pull it out for larger projects, and they would pull out of the ending fund balance. This doesn't take into consideration that we do plan on a benefit fundraiser annually now. We're looking for it in the fall. Based on what other libraries have experienced with a similar type of event, we've never done one before, so we don't know. But we think that could pull in $20,000 to $30,000 a year, and that would all go into that same. Like I want it to be set aside for building issues. This is our fundraiser for the building.
Well, we've got 3 emails you can send.
I know.
Send those invites to.
Hopefully they will come. We're excited. We think it'll be fun, but we also think we can bring in a little bit more money to cover the years when interest rates will go down.
Yeah. So Do you also use this fund to pay for things like if there's a flood or things like that, or will that come out of your operational budget, like your regular, like little maintenance, repair and things like that?
Yeah, if you had a catastrophic thing, it would come out of our ending fund balance.
So what about like things like touch-up paint or something? If
Yeah,
that's in
yeah,
your
so
normal
we have-
operational?
Right now, that maintenance budget's 18,000 to cover those things, and it's insufficient at this point.
What's your life looking like on your elevator?
That is on the replacement schedule. I think it's
33?
maybe.
Okay, so not yet.
Within the next 5 years, yeah, but that is on the schedule of things that will die eventually.
Okay.
It's down there, not within the next 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, I doubt they'll all go out at the same time. We do regularly. We've had some of our elders need tender loving care, but we haven't had any. I just not talking about it, just. I don't wanna jinx anything. We seem to be doing okay.
Okay.
Any other questions for Carla?
Okay.
Councilor Hanlon.
So maybe you'll make this clear. I don't know if you're gonna talk more about other issues, but from your previous presentation, I just wanted to get a sense of whether or not building maintenance, I mean, I assume the building maintenance costs have increased over time. But to what degree is the financial shortfall comes from the building maintenance problems versus just the cost of running the same programs we've been running?
So far where the building has come into affecting our financial situation is the really big project where we were paying. Years. $100,000 more that. Way faster than we had anticipated, which is why we hadn't asked for money up until this point. So building maintenance stuff, we seem to be able to keep painting and repairing those little things without too much extra money. That budget hasn't changed, though we have started buying from a different supplier that came cheaper. We're, finding cheaper ways to do some of the same things to try to keep up with that. Some of the costs have gone up. I haven't noticed that significantly in the small daily maintenance kind of things, if that's what you're asking.
So it's more just the cost of the running of the library that's the issue, not the maintenance.
Yes, and that we just need to have a balanced budget. We want to be able to start building up that ending fund balance so that in years when we need the extra money for big building costs, we can pull it out of it without diminishing it below 1.5 million, honestly. Like I just would love to keep it always above 1.5 million. But every year we find savings, whether it's because we couldn't hire someone fast enough, like you have those kinds of savings, and also some years we don't use as much power because it's not as hot this summer, or winter, our gas bills aren't quite as high, and so there's always places where we're saving, and all of that would go to that ending fund balance, hoping to build it up to a point where we can rely on it a little bit more regularly to subsidize what the endowment can't, because we can't pull out of the endowment more than the interest. It has to stay at 2 million. Am I answering your question?
Well, I'll let you keep going and then more. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Perfect. Jenny.
Thank you.
Spatafora.
Spatafora. It's
Spatafora.
Italian, just utilize it somehow. I'm thinking a little bit along what he's saying, maybe obviously there is not a price tag that has not increased in the last 5 years. Literally everyone is feeling it in their personal bank accounts as well as in the city, and the library is definitely no different. I think it's wisdom of the past budgets that is showing us now that even with inflation, we're able to still keep our heads above water. And and Carla's looking into the future, she hasn't had numbers to compare with in the past. She doesn't know if, well, is inflation causing us more stress now or not? Because the beauty is our building is beautiful, it was built beautiful, and it's lasted really well. And now she's facing a whole new set of problems as it starts aging, right? So she can't really say, well, I compared to 10 years ago and the inflation, we're spending a lot more because of inflation now. She doesn't have that luxury, but certainly it has to be part of the story.
Yeah, actually, Dr. sent me some numbers today that I think the same numbers were in one of my earlier presentations that just showed like our costs, and obviously our revenues were lower than our expenses, but it broke out like our operation and our personnel and our capital expenses, and it's the personnel costs, salary increases, our operational, which covers all of those supplies and things like all the programming, all the books, all of that stayed really level. And then it's our capital expenses or the other things. So a lot of the increase is personnel, just with wage increases.
Yeah.
So why has the library not had a capital improvements fund like the other departments do? Why hasn't it been added to that so that you have a 5-year plan? They save up for some of these things instead of dipping into the fund balance, which is in your operational budget. Why not something separate?
I don't know. I don't know why they did it that way. They had, so I think he just used the ending fund balance that way. Like it was there for that, for any capital improvements we have. And we didn't have anything written out, but there weren't these costs coming due at that point. So I can't tell you why he made that decision, why there wasn't a formal plan. I think part of it was a new building. And he knew the things that he felt like needed to be replaced, and he kept them in his mind. And he looked at his ending fund balance. It was very healthy at the time, and for a long time, you know, they were bringing in more revenue, and that was growing. And as that changed, the feeling was we're going to just take out of that ending fund balance until we reach a point when we need that ending fund balance to stay at, you know, like with the city at about 35% right now. With 1.5 million, we're about 20%. So I think having an ending fund balance that is 75% of your operating costs, they could have sold it as, let's do a tax increase now to cover library expenses and keep that really big savings account because we have a big building. That was a decision that could have been made, and maybe that would have been the right decision. That wasn't the decision that was made. The decision that was made is we will use that ending fund balance to cover our costs and also act as our backup if we need it for something with the building. And tell you,
Just looking at a building that's now starting to need more, and it will need more. I think we all recognize it's gonna need more. It just seems like it would be a good time to switch it to like a capital improvements plan with a capital improvements.
So I guess I'm misunderstanding because I felt like that's what this is. And so what would be the difference between what this plan that I've outlined is for the next 5 years and a capital improvement, 5-year capital improvement plan? What?
From what I understand, it's a completely different account. And then it just sits in there and it's just used for those improvements. The way you have it now, it's used for whatever I think you want to spend it for. This would just be something that's just.
Well, we can't pull it out without an appropriation through the city.
Why don't you explain to her what the fund is? She doesn't even know about the endowment.
Well, I know about the endowment. The endowment is separate, but she's.
Yeah, but it's the interest from the endowment that this all those money comes from.
Not all of it. She's putting some of it from her operations fund.
From the ending fund balance.
Ending fund balance.
And I think I would have to, Joan, I don't know, is there a clarification, like should we have a separate account that we're putting money in? Or is using the ending fund balance as a capital improvement account appropriate?
Well, I would say a couple things. Number one, we had some discussions and are proposing that we do include the library as part of our 5-year capital plan that we share with the council each year. So that kind of goes that similar process. And then what we've done typically is we have just one separate account, and sometimes we use a different function. where we record and show our capital improvements. But I would say what you've done is kind of the groundwork for preparing a capital plan. And I think it's excellent. And then what we would want to do is we would just kind of use, and I think we would, one of the things that we show in our capital improvement plan that we share is that what the funding sources are, you know, and it could be fund balance, it could be like you've mentioned, coming from the endowment fund. And so I think just formalizing that and having that format, it's basically what you've shared, but with just a little bit more structure.
I would need finance to help me with the more structure.
We plan on doing that. And we start that process in January, and then we complete it by the 1st of March. And so we would do that, and we could do that in coordination with the library board too, so they would have a chance to review it and have some input.
And if I understand this correctly, this wouldn't require the creation of a capital improvement fund for the library. We would just designate that the funds that are going for the library capital improvements are coming from this balance.
Yeah, we may set up a separate account for it or separate function, but it would all be within the library.
Yeah.
Yeah, various departments have various funds that they use, right? Grants or other kinds of sources to pay for their capital improvements. It's not always from just one dedicated.
Yeah, they have different funding
capital improvement
sources.
source, yeah.
Yep.
That help. It helps me actually, that.
Because that's personally how I'd rather see it set up. You're doing a great job with the tools that you have in your toolbox, but there's other tools out there that I'd rather see.
Yeah, but it sounds like it's something that it's gonna take us some time to formalize all of that.
Yeah.
Hopefully, the groundwork and the intention is to use these funding sources. And again, to add as much as we can, fundraising or whatever, and grants to cover a lot of these costs. Yes.
Okay, more questions. Did you say that before that you had higher revenues coming in than you do now? Or that
Previous years.
in previous years?
Yes.
What's changed?
Yeah, why were
What's
revenues
changed?
higher?
Well, the revenues that have changed are that vehicle tax and the prior year redemption. Prior year redemption.
Okay, so these are not revenues that you have control over. It's not like you had higher revenues from room rentals or something and that's gone down.
No, all of anything we have control over has gone up. The things we don't have control over, and even, so not this year, but the previous fiscal year, even our just property tax revenue was down. I don't remember how much, but combined, it was like 300,000, which is why that year, usually we were planning on being like taking out of income balance about 300,000, but because our revenues were 300,000 less than what had been anticipated, it was much bigger. And that's not something, I mean, one of the things that like we rely on this one, like these tax revenues take up, they're 92% of our budget. And so when that comes in, and even this past fiscal year, it was about 150,000 below, and I'm still able to save $200,000. But like that takes a toll on the budget where, but the city knows that as well, like the city wasn't getting as many sales tax, like that happens. And they did adjust it, so this year's budgeted amounts for those two are lower than what they were last year, so we are getting less revenue than was anticipated last year. Hopefully it's more accurate to what we will actually get, but it is lower.
So on your personnel cost, is the only control that you have over that the number of people who are working for you? Do you set their pay scales? Do you approve COLAs or anything like that?
So full-time positions, when we hire someone, we set they're in a range that is assigned by employer. So when I hire a librarian, they belong on this scale. And based on their number of years, we pick where on that scale we feel like their years of experience fit. Part-time hours, we do have control over what we pay people. So that is something we have control over. Last year, some of the increase that we saw was because we raised most of the part-time hours, which had not been raised since before the pandemic. People weren't working for $9 an hour anymore, and so.
You were paying people $9 an hour?
We're paying $10 an hour now. So, those we went out and looked at different libraries in the county and tried to be where everybody else was, which is something we feel like we do need to do annually. Don't know that we have to raise them annually or anything like that, but looking at them annually. Because any COLA, which is given to us by the city, which we very much appreciate, but isn't something that we control. That goes to full-time staff, but not part-time staff. And when 25% of our staff is full-time, the other 75% see the COLA, don't feel the COLA. We still appreciate them. And again, annually, we feel like it's fair to look at what other libraries are paying for the same kind of positions and try to stay at least competitive, because we know we're not paying as much as Burger King because we can't. And so, but so we don't want to lose people, okay, so that we can't. And during the pandemic, we actually got, so we couldn't hire anymore.
I know Daniel Softley's talked to the council a couple times, at least once a year, about the need for us to have competitive pay. And that's always been part of the presentation, asking the city to pass a COLA or to approve a COLA that the administration will do. And so that's part of the budget. But it sounds like when we approve a COLA, then we are increasing your personnel cost.
And we have to find the money for it, which
Then you
is
have to find the money for it.
what we've done. And-
Right.
And we hope to continue to do that. We do appreciate the COLAs, but it's not that the city's asking us to pay our people the right amount, and then also here's an additional amount of money.
Right, so if we gave you the COLA and then like a little appropriation to cover the cost of the COLA, that would be easier for you.
Well,
Or if we did like a modest increase of the mill rate to cover that inflationary thing, then that would also keep you balanced. But otherwise, what you're doing is you're getting about the same amount through your taxes, but we've increased your cost.
and I don't know what the city's amounts are, but we're like, our personnel is about 63% of our budget. So it's just such a huge chunk that it does affect us. When that goes up, you're getting a COLA, plus there's merit increases and any what are they called? Market study, thank you. Any market study adjustments, like all of that comes to HR to us. And the appropriations will cover us for the year,
But not the next
but
year.
not next year.
Yeah,
So the $800,000 shortfall is, I mean, whatever amount of money you're short after all this discussion and voting is over, is going to mostly go to, I mean, from what you said to me, or somebody said to me at the tour, programs are about $100,000. So most of that's gonna come out of the part-time salary, because that is more discretionary than
It's the only place I have, and I actually, at the very end, I have some slides of where we feel like we can get money if there's no mill increase. If we don't get any of the money, I still feel very strongly that we need to balance our budget. And we have plans for how to do that. But I do have that in the presentation and some numbers specifically.
Just have a clarification question. So Daniel's the one that does your market study through your wages. It's not you guys.
For the full-time staff,
Just full-time.
just full-time.
Scott, does he do that for part-time staff or like the rec center and other things? Or is
What
that-
we all work from is a range that we work from where we can pay, and that includes all part-time and seasonal staff. So it is a fairly large range to work from, all the way from minimum wage up to, a higher end. Let's say it's a fitness instructor that works 1 hour a week or something like that. So there is a big range to work from in there. A lot of discretion is left in it.
Staff, the full-time staff is
Yeah, full-time staff, it's a detailed market study going in to make sure we are compensating plus or minus 5%, you know, to determine exactly where we're at, and then that dictates when that market study is. So it's not only the departments that are watching how we are in the market, it is, you know, it's the city as a whole to make sure we're doing that.
Becky, if it helps, let me give a specific example. In my department, there's one particular position that I have full-time and part-time people that are classified exactly the same. They work the exact same job. It's just some of them full-time. When the market study gets done, the panel determines that job classification should move. The range moves, and the full-time person gets an automatic bump. The part-time person does not get a bump unless I go in and give them a bump. Although, I mean, the caveat to that is if what they were currently being paid was below the bottom of the range, that's actually for part-time people still permissible, but HR would tell me, by the way, you're paying them below.
You need to be required to move them up, or is that still at your discretion?
I think, my understanding is that's still on a department director discretion. It's a guideline.
And I have some slides talking specifically about our personnel, because I think that is part of what we're doing and how we do it. But we actually don't adjust our full-time librarians. They are paid a good amount more than our part-time librarians. And part of that is because we rely on those full-time librarians to be leadership. They are supervisors when other people are gone. They are responsible for a lot more, though in some aspects of the job, they're doing the same thing, but they do have additional responsibilities. And where we only have 25% of our staff as full-time, I want to keep that as high as possible, because that's where you get your structure, you get your consistency, you get your experience, you get better customer service, better services, the longer and more professional you can get. And so we feel like we're about at 2 part-time to 1 full-time when you're talking about the librarians, and the longer you can keep them, their value grows exponentially as they grow in experience. And having just full-time staff or part-time staff in the building is something I'm really uncomfortable with, because of the public's great, but they also come with some behavior issues. And you want to make sure that you have someone in the building that can take care of stuff like that, and not just rely on part-time people that have been working at the library for a few months. So, all right. Any other building questions?
So go ahead and
Okay. So this next part is comparisons, and I was asked to present some different comparisons. I have a set of national comparisons and Utah comparisons to kind of give you an idea of where we lie in all of these things. One thing to just keep in mind is that, as Brian pointed out, libraries are handled very differently everywhere you go. There's a lot of variety. And so even when you're looking at the budget, their revenue sources come from different places. Building costs vary. If you're part of the general fund, you a lot of times won't pay for chargebacks. You might not pay for your building, you may not pay for cleaning, there's lots of different things. And when I look at these comparisons, mostly what I get from libraries off of their reporting documents is their personnel money, their operating costs, and their capital expenses. Like that's, and sometimes collection. So how much they're spending on their materials. And that's basically what you get. So in that operations, it's hard to know what they are paying for. You take Orem, who doesn't have a chargeback, they pay for their cleaning and some of their utilities, but not all their, and we pay for all of it. And so it's kind of hard. It's not necessarily direct apples to apples when you're comparing, but I did the best I could to, and cities are reporting different numbers. So we do our best, but just kind of keep those things in mind. This national comparison, I got this information from the Institute of Museum and Library Services, which is a national government group that kind of keeps an eye on libraries. And I went into their data. Their most recent data was 2021. I wish it was more recent, but it's 2021, which was also part of the pandemic. So that, do keep that in mind with some of the numbers. But I took populations 5% above and 5% below, so 110,000 to 120,000, because we're right there at 115. It includes 45 libraries. They have between 1 and 8 buildings, average 3, which kind of goes to show that we in a community with a population our size should probably have 3 branches. We should have 3 different buildings in the different areas of our community. We don't. It is interesting to know that some of the libraries I was looking at who have 3 branches have about 100,000 square feet, which is about what we have. So their combined buildings are about the size of our one. We do have a very large building. I just found out from the state library. We have the 2nd largest library building in the state. So the downtown Salt Lake Library is bigger than us, but we have a bigger building than anybody else, for better or worse.
For better.
For better. It is beautiful.
It's a nice.
It's a wonderful building. So first number is total operating expenditures. The yellow line is us, and the top one is just the total, and the bottom one is just basically the same thing, but it is an average per person cost. Because that kind of helps to even out some of the discrepancies in the population size. But we average $39.29 per person, we are $39.29 per person in 2021, and the average was $40.59. So we're a little bit below, but we're definitely not. This really big one right here is Salt Lake City. Follow them through the whole list. They give them lots of money. And just raise your hand if you have questions for any of these. This is staff expenditures. And again, you'll see that we are on the low end of that, according to this group of libraries. If you go in one of the states one, you'll see that our FTE is a little above average, but our total salary costs are below average. And that's kind of consistent with, we have so many part-time. We have more FTEs because of all the part-time people we use. But they're much cheaper. Bless them. Total paid staff. So this is paid staff per, so this is what I was just saying. So this is per person or per 1,000 people in your community. So a way to, again, iron out the population differences, but we are a little bit high. So our salary costs are a little bit low, but our FTEs are a little bit high based on. Collection, so how much do we spend on our collection? This is a little bit higher than average. I would interpret that, and I think that money we're trying to spend it on the experience of our patrons. This is a number that is felt by patrons. This is the books that we're buying, the ebooks we're buying. That's what this money is. We do spend a little bit more than average for those libraries on that cost. Annual circulation. I'm very impressed with this number. We do circulate a lot. We're really good at checking things out. And that's really a couple things. I did want to point out that the 2 libraries that circulate more than us have budgets of 24 and 20 million. And we do it on 5. And the difference there is, and this isn't per capita. This is like how much we check out. And the difference is, first of all, our staff. We buy what people want. We get it into their hands. Our outreach services help with that. Like we're doing things to get out in the community and get things in people's hands. Our collection is used, and it's used heavily. I will caveat all of this with, this was the pandemic. So I don't know, especially this next number, these physical visits. We closed for just a couple months during the pandemic. I think this number right here, I want to say, is actually Salt Lake City because they were closed for most of that. So our visits were high. I don't know how much they were open other than that, but people visited us, even in a pandemic. Okay.
No, my bad. You said
Oh.
physical. I was just making sure that that wasn't our online checkout.
That's what I was going to ask too, is physical books.
Yeah, so,
So that is physical books, does that include like the mobile?
the circulation,
Yeah, sorry, yeah, no, the visits, does that include like the drive up, pickup?
yes. Oh, I'm not sure, the circulation for sure it was, because we were doing a
Yeah.
lot of curbside.
I meant the visits, does that include the
The
curbside?
visits is a gate count, so it's
Okay.
people coming into the building.
So that doesn't include
Right.
many,
This,
many.
the annual circulation does include our digital, our books and audio. Computer usage, we're higher than average. Yeah, so that is the national comparison that I found. Any questions? We can move on to the state. I wasn't sure. I was using 2021 numbers, and I was kind of worried about that. For these numbers, for the state numbers, I got 2022 numbers, which was great. And I think yesterday or the day before, the 2023 numbers became available, but I could not redo all of my work. So, 2022 numbers. But I was worried that it would look like our expenses had gone way up in the last couple years since these numbers. So I did pull 2025 projected budgets for all of the cities in Utah that we're comparing ourselves to see compared to 2022, what their 2025 budget looked like. I wanted to make sure that we hadn't grown where other people had. Our budget from 2022 to this year, our expenditures have gone up 2%, which is the line across. And then the darker line is increase or decrease of the other state libraries that I've used in the comparison. Which made me feel better that I hadn't just ballooned all of my expenditures, like expenditures across the board. Our foreign has gone down. Your city. We're not looking at our costs more than anybody else, which is what I wanted to make sure of, because I wasn't sure myself. But that made me feel a little bit better. The libraries that we're doing here is population over 30,000 or an operating budget of over $1 million, which that's in there that is really interesting is the at Moab Library. They have like 9,000 people and they have $1 million. Because they did have a very good budget. So there's 1 to 20 buildings in any of these. And almost all the numbers that you'll see are going to be per capita, and that's because the discrepancy is, you have Salt Lake City and Salt Lake County, and then it made all of the other libraries look the same, where we vary a good deal. So all the numbers are per capita. Here is visits per capita based on Utah libraries. Again, this is 2022 numbers. We are about average for Utah libraries.
Is there a library that had 0 visits?
No, but Logan was really low, and that they just got a new library and they were shut down for a while.
Oh, okay.
So. They were down to 0. But it's because of they were closed.
Okay.
Checkouts per capita, see that we're, again, we do really well when it comes to getting our collection into our patrons' hands.
Do you feel that you have more checkouts because you do more outreach and you have events and story times and things like that? Like,
I think that's part of it, because I think that draws people in. People won't check things out if they don't think of you when they need something. So I think it's I feel like it's one big package. I don't know that I've ever been able to trace why in 2021, which was the national numbers, we didn't have a van. So it's not that kind of outreach, but it is, I really think a lot of it is, we spend a lot of time curating our collection. I was talking to a friend of mine that works at the BYU library, and they say, if you would like to see the difference between a well-curated collection and a not well-curated, look at my libraries, and then go to 4th floor of the BYU library where they don't get rid of anything ever. And it makes a difference. You walk to the shelf and you want to check something out because you see things that are appealing. And so that doesn't just happen, like that is work. That is us spending a lot of time there. And also the fact that we consider ourselves to be a popular lending library. We buy what people are asking for. And we try to have like a wide variety of things. We try to have all of our topics and all of our authors and all of it covered. But if there's a topic and nobody's checking it out and nobody seems to care, I'm not gonna keep it just because nationally they say you should have this book on the shelf. You should have something on that topic, but we try to spend our money on things like our ebook digital collection. We rely on the state library who does an amazing job curating the collection, and then we spend our money on holds so that we know that the books we're buying are being checked out over and over and over again, because when we buy them, there's already 6 people waiting for it. And that's how we make sure we have what people are looking for so that they're checking things out. And if you're finding the things that you want, then you're more motivated to go to the library and find more things. You think of the library, they had what I needed, they helped me out. It draws people back at the times when they need you. Yeah.
I was doing
Jenny?
she was fixing her
At the
hair.
same time.
I probably should. If I can tell a small story, the opportunity I had over here at the farmer's market to sit at the library table and the enormous amount of college students that stopped to talk to us, that signed up for a library card, the majority of them were so excited about the free dating opportunities at the library. So they didn't think initially to come to Provo City Library to check out a cool book, but they absolutely do now. So that's just in reference to your comment. I was overwhelmed with the amount of excitement that so many of our college community that came to the farmer's market that day had about the date night ideas and different activities. And then obviously when they get there, these great books and the displays that you have will draw them in and encourage them to come over and over again.
Yeah, I think we know that not everybody is a reader. Like, if we were just books, then we would only be serving the people who like to read. And we're more than that, we're an information and a resource sharing center. We're a place for people to be where they don't have to spend money, where they can experience things with their families. I think all of these things are things that we do. And if people don't think of the library when they have a need, like, we can tell you over and over again that we have Lincoln Learning, we can help you learn Excel, but that information, 25 years of experience goes just right past you until you need an Excel class and someone tells you. So trying to find the need that someone has, fulfill that need, and then when they have a need again, they think of the library to come.
I was just gonna mention that I think one of the needs that I'm surprised, just how many people find it so important, because we often don't think about things that don't apply to ourselves, is our Spanish community. And the opportunity that the curated books in Spanish, programs in Spanish that are helping these families that are growing and developing. And I'm in an area that's very diverse. And so I love being able to share that with people and say, it's okay that your mom doesn't speak English, she can still take you to the library, right? I don't see that a lot at other libraries. And so that's one thing that's like spectacular about Provo. Another thing that's spectacular about what Provo.
I'm sorry, I keep pointing to. Thank you so much. Any other questions? So expenditures per capita, overall, we're a little bit high. From what I can find out, I don't know any other library who spends more of a percentage of their budget on their building, whether it's and chargebacks and building, because they're a lot of times part of the city, so they don't have those costs. And so I believe that that is why this number would be a little bit above average, but it is not crazy. It is a little bit above average. At Salt Lake City and Salt Lake County, just they skew everything. Collection expenditures, again, we're a little bit high, just like we were on the national numbers. Staff expenditures, we're low. So because I didn't know what went into people's budgets, I asked all of my library director friends in the state to send me some information, answer some questions, and some of them got back to me. So I'm responding to the ones that did get back to me. And we thought it was really helpful because they are actually the most like us that I could find. They are separate, they have chargebacks, they have their own building costs. So this is kind of a comparison. They have 237% of our population, 296% of our budget, 204% of our personnel costs, 222% of our materials cost, 490%. I was so jealous of that number of our training and travel cost. And then chargebacks was only 102% of their costs. And so it's about the same as what we are paying on our level with our $5 million budget. So, and then their square footage is about 207%. So they have 5 buildings, which is just about twice the size of our budget. Wanted to talk about staffing, and then I have some comparisons for the staffing as well. So we have 22 full-time employees, 23%, but it's 64% of our personnel budget is those 22 people. 74 part-time employees is just 35% of our budget. And that's how we can have the level of staffing that we have is because we use part-time. To my memory, and I have asked everybody that's been around as long as we could, we went back and tried to remember all the full-time positions. We know we have lost at least 2. And whenever we've lost 2, we usually split it up into 3 or 4 in order to cover some of the additional needs that we have. Or I don't know. But our total full-time equivalent has gone up, but our full-time employees, I think the last time, actually, I was just sent this. We haven't, it doesn't go back far enough to know, at least since 2015, but I think we've been at this level since. Staff, they have moved around. Them in places where we didn't need them. So whenever someone leaves a full-time position, we ask, are we getting the most use? Is this in a place where it is having the most impact for our community? And then we'll move it. So these are the libraries that responded to my request for information. The smaller line is the percentage of their employees who are working full-time. So we're the 4th one there. All of these libraries have more of a percentage of their workforce that are full-time than us. And then the taller line would be their overall personnel costs, or as a percentage of their budget. So us at like 60, I think it's 63, but somewhere right there is low compared to almost anybody else that responded tonight. I tried to get as many as I could. I don't necessarily need to go through these. You have it on your thing. I just wanted to show my little group again, the bigger libraries and anyway over $1 million. These dots represent all of the libraries on these per capita numbers. We do things really well, but we're also in the range. We're not the best at, I don't think we're the best at any of these things per capita, like numbers wise. However, I think if you look at the letters that you're getting, I feel like we do the things we do in a way that this community appreciates. And it's that attention to detail and giving, just taking what we have and making the most of every piece of cardstock. Like everything that we're buying, we are trying to make sure that it goes as far as possible for our population.
So, sorry.
Yeah. Which, oh, sorry.
That one.
Yeah.
Total service area population divided by number of programs offered. So we're way at the bottom in terms of programs per capita. Close to the bottom.
Yes. This shocked me. Ask Marilee, I made her check numbers multiple times. This, I don't know how people do more because
Well, I wonder if it's a function of having more buildings,
I
right?
think that's probably a good part of it, though we are able
Triple
to
your
do,
reading hours and things like that, because you have 3 different spaces or 4 or 5.
that's going to, in order, like we do 2 million, just shy of 2 million, or 2 million, 2,000 programs a year. I know, 2,000, and I think the number said we had to do like almost, was it 4,000 in order to like be at the very top. I don't know how we can do double what we're doing, because we're very busy and we have lots of spaces and we're using stuff all the time. I'm not sure how we could possibly do more.
A little more funding and more staff. I'm just gonna spell it out.
I feel like we're in a very good place for our program. Would I love to be able to spend more on prizes for somebody? Sure, like that would be fun. Do we need that? No, and yeah, I really feel like programming wise, we're hitting a lot of the places that we need to hit. Okay, that's the end of that presentation. We're gonna move on to the next one. Did anyone have any questions? I just want to talk for a second about the library's community value, impact, and kind of in a numbers aspect of it. There's calculator on use the library, put in what services you use, and it'll tell you how much it's given back to you in the year, which is great. But if we took the whole community, books checked out, like physical books checked out, we returned to the community $17 million worth of service. Digital books, 7 million. Music downloads, this is actually a service that's going away, but they stream a lot of music. And those are Pandora, you know, subscriptions that don't have to be purchased by people who might not be able to afford that. Children's programs, this $358,000 is one of those things that fills a gap in preschool availability in the community. You want to be able to give kids an opportunity to be away from their parents in a school-like environment, and that's what our story times do. And they get kids ready for that experience for parents who are not able to enroll their children in preschool. So that's an important one. Teens and adults, they need things. Free room uses, so these are nonprofit organizations that use our community as a space to meet. So $22,000 worth of free rental space for Bike Walk Provo and the Lake Shade Group like meets there, and Al-Anon, and all of those things where they need a place to live in the community. We fulfill that need. These performances seem kind of stopping, but we have 6,487 people coming to the ballroom last year to experience art in some form. And just last week, we had, for the first time, it was our first time having an opera come in, and it was, they wanted it to be very open. They wanted people to bring little kids and people who have a hard time sitting and being quiet. And it was amazing. They had over 300 people there, and the 2 stories I heard was someone who, they're not sure if he was homeless or he's an older gentleman, he's in the library all the time, had never been to an opera before, and afterwards just came and said, this is my first experience with opera. The hairs on my arm wouldn't go down the whole time. Like, having that experience is something that they can't go to the Covey Center for because they can't afford that. There was a child, and I don't know the age of the child, but they said, sitting on the front row, totally engaged. And at the very end, it was our production of Romeo and Juliet. When they died, evidently there was a gasp and emotional reaction from this child who was just engaged in this art form that's really hard to get exposure to. And we do plays, and we do music, and we do cultural music, and we do magic shows, and just the kind of things that you can't, not everybody can afford to take their family to those kinds of things, but you want to expose them to it. And these are some of the things that we bring. The radon detectors we've had for 3 weeks now, already $800 returned to the community, that 8 people have checked those out, and it's $100 they don't have to spend on their own radon detectors.
Homeless is still very low.
Anyway, just kind of pointing out that we return value to the community. I feel like everybody understands that. I wanna.
Hey Carla, Craig has to go at 7. So he had a comment about the building. Craig, if you wanna unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. I'm sorry, I do have to bounce at the top of the hour. I just wanted to say thank you for the information. My biggest takeaway from this is just wanting to make sure that any increase that's improved is put into a capital improvement project. And I know we talked about that. Making sure that you're very connected to what John is doing in terms of putting those budgets together. Again, he's running them for the whole city, the case for library too. I know it happens in parts, and it sounds like that might be even closer, work together. And just making sure that we are taking care of the physical asset of the building and anticipating those expenses that are coming up. So just wanted to say thank you for the information. It's helpful to see, and my biggest concern is the physical plant of the building itself.
Thanks, Craig.
I found it interesting to see this. This is a heat map for where library cards, households with library cards are. I think you'll notice that the closer we get to the lake, we lose people. But we are getting the van over there more and more. Outreach is something that could be seen as outside our core. But I feel like it is part of our core in the way that we can, at this point, without a branch on the west side, be able to get our services over to people who can't necessarily get to our building. And finally, this building, which we just heard, like, this building is so important. But I would like to just point out a couple things. Why does the community love this building? Because it's beautiful. It is beautiful, and there is history there, and there is a connection there. But I would like to posit that it's also because they have positive interactions, positive things coming from this building. They were there when a friend got married in this building. They were there when they were able to have a date with their spouse in this building. They were there when they went to a story time, when they first experienced opera, when they were able to do all of these things, when they were able to do a music video with their friend in the basement lab. They were able to have something in a hung art show in the homegrown art show in the attic. Like, these are all things that make that connection. I think without those things in the building, this would be a pretty building, but we wouldn't have hundreds of people sending emails to say we need to keep funding, because it's the things going on inside and the things coming out of this building that make it so important. I 100% understand and agree that we need to be taking care of this building. But without additional funding, we can't do the things that we're doing inside the building. And those things are really important as well. And I think there's a balance to be had. Do I feel like we have found it in the past? No, I think we need to get there. What we're asking for, I'll be showing you, is really operating costs. Like, we need right now operating costs. Once we can get a balanced budget, we can start finding ways that we can save to increase that ending fund balance, to building up those accounts where we are ready to take care of the building when some of the bigger expensive things come due. So that's kind of my.
Lisa had a question.
Oh, no, I was
Or
gonna make a
comment.
comment about outreach. I actually talked to one of the outreach librarians last week. We ran into them. I didn't even know it was happening, a mural event at a park.
Oh, yeah.
I just happened to
The
stop
top
by.
sales.
Yeah, and they shared with me that they were able to get to the Franklin Community Center, that's an area the library has been trying to get into for quite a while. And that they were making library cards the whole time. And I asked, I said, do you have a number? And they looked it up and they said it was 16. We registered 16 new library card holders. And so many people expressed that they want to come to the library. It's just not possible for them because they don't have a vehicle or their jobs prohibit it. But if the library could come to them, this is what we want. We want our kids to have exposure to books, to these resources. And I thought that was amazing, that there's still areas in our community that don't have access to the library.
And we have set up that recurring visit to Franklin Center, and they check out items to them that won't be due until the next visit. So they're able to bring holds to them and all those things, so they can act like basically just bring the library to them, they can have access. So alright, this is my final section of my presentation. These are the cuts that we already made. And we've been through them before, just wanted to point those out again. But looking at finding ways to balance the budget if we were to get no increase. First of all, if we were just trying to do it by programming or materials. This is my entire budget. If I do like 10%, I can maybe save $60,000. If I cut every book, every ebook, every program, every database, I'll have an extra $40,000 to spend somewhere. Like that's everything. Those budgets are just not big enough that cuts make a difference to the size that we need. So this is like another 10% cut. We've already cut about 10% of all of these already. This would be another 10%, so another 20%. I mean, so 20% total. Maybe part of our solution, we were looking at that. But really it would have to come through personnel cuts. So looking at the costs and what it would mean, it's basically a 10% decrease in our workforce, 2 full-time, 11 part-time, and probably these would be what would happen. We'd have to close the attic, we would close the basement, and eliminate up to 10 service hours. We just can't drop personnel without dropping service hours. And whether that means closing or opening at 10, closing at 8, having shorter hours on Saturday. If we get the full amount that we're asking for, it shouldn't be necessary. If we get a portion, some of this may be necessary. There's just, when you look at our budget, like these are the things I have control over. I can cut some of the books to some degree, but it has to come out of personnel. And if you look at our building, we basically have 7 floors. We have 7 areas. The building was built that way. If it was all 1 floor, then you could have 1 or 2 staff members staff all of it. It's not the way we're built. Each of the areas has to have a staff member present, if not 2, to be safe. And it just takes this many people to be able to do that. So with a 10% decrease in our staff, it would be a 10% decrease in our operating hours, which is a decrease in services to our community. So we would love to avoid that at all costs, but there's really no other places I can find money. I can't decrease my chargebacks. I can't decrease the electric bill is. I can't.
Sorry, so if you decrease the staff, one of the ways we've talked about raising money is the room rentals, but don't you have to decrease the time on that too? So then that's another impact that would happen. I know that's because how much staff, you have to have staff there to run the rentals.
Yeah, so we have talked about and feel pretty good about starting to rent out the attic. We aren't sure what the response will be, what we'll be able to charge, and how much we'd be able to bring in. So I think we would be able to bring in between $20,000 to $40,000. Maybe it could be more, maybe it could be twice that. I don't know. But the attic would be a space like the ballroom where we wouldn't have to have staff in it. We have a lot of cameras up there. If someone is responsible in renting it on their own, like we wouldn't need staff overseeing it necessarily.
But you have rooms on different levels that
do. So the meeting room areas, like we have our event staff that oversee all of them. And we have cameras throughout those. But it's the public areas and the library areas where we have to have staffing all the time. We wouldn't be able to cut back our event staffing or our security staffing. I think that's what you're saying. Like there are departments where we couldn't cut back staff and still be able to bring in the revenue that we currently bring in for the meeting spaces that we have. So it really has to come from the library service hours.
Sorry. All right. Any questions for Carla? Councilor Marshall?
So do you have a sense of when people are coming to the library through the day? Like, are there busier times and less busy times? I'm just wondering if you have to cut at the beginning or the end of the day, are those higher volume times or lower volume times?
Lower volume times, okay, for sure. Our busiest time of day is story times, which they start at 10. So we would have to figure that out. Either story times would have to shift a half hour or I'm not sure. if we opened later. If we closed earlier, probably right now, this is what I would recommend that we do, because it is quieter. We are busy during story time and we are busy right as school and work is getting out. So from like 2 to 6-ish is really our busiest hours. But we have story times that go until 12:30, and then we have a little like lunch lull maybe, and then about 6 o'clock things start to slow down also.
How busy are your Saturdays?
Saturdays are busy, and sometimes it depends on the Saturday. They can be slow if people can't get to the library because there's a race. And holidays, conference weekend, like Easter, we really have people in and out all day long. Plus, we'll do programming on Saturday, especially for families who can't come to story time during the week. Like we try to have things on the weekends that and make sure we're open so that families can bring their kids all into the library together, and they might not have to do that during the week. So Saturdays are slower than probably a weekday, but I would say full Saturday is busier than weekday. And I think if we made any recommendations, we're going to close each hour, their best to get those hours. At least number of people.
So, but what you're talking about is the 500,000, right? So
Yeah.
where's the other 300,000 already affecting?
Already affecting, so we cut.
Remind us again.
Yeah. Oh, right there. So we cut 10% of our ebook and our book budgets. Streaming services, we cut our movie streaming and our music streaming services. We're getting rid of all attic exhibits that weren't local. So that went from 17,000 to 7,000. And then technology, we did just get a large grant that replaced a lot of things needed replacing now. Eventually we will need to have more money in those because our technology will get old for the next few years. So like we're gonna need personnel, they were able to put into our budget a rollover allowance. Is that how, that's how we're stating it? Because we always have about that much in savings when we don't fill positions as quickly. There's always a time when someone quits that you don't have anyone you're paying. And so we usually, it's about $75,000 there. And then my original budget with the $800,000 over did include a salary increase for our part-time staff, and I cut that entirely. And then some I pulled out of the building with the understanding that $100,000 we usually don't have coming out of the general.
And if you, and I don't know if this is too much of a crystal ball question, but if no increase is given, what happens next year?
The other one, that's.
The next year?
Yeah,
The next year, all these cuts were made.
but is there, I mean, we went from last year to this year with a pretty dramatic revenue shift, right?
Yes.
So is there a chance that next year you're not within budget again?
Yes. And I mean,
So
depends
in
on the
other
COLA.
words, the cuts may not be enough.
It depends on what our costs, if electric power goes up and we have to put more in that account, if we get a COLA and that goes up, like there's all of these things that, how do I absorb any of those increased costs? I would have to ask again. And with so much of our revenue coming from, you know, this one property tax, I don't know how much I can absorb every year to year without asking for an increase. It's definitely not gonna be 22 years between adjustments to that number.
I mean, I guess for the sake of the public, you know, I feel like we've talked a lot about this amongst ourselves, but there still seems to be a lack of understanding of what the root causes of the shortfall might be, and there's maybe some discussion or questions raised about, okay, is this a mismanagement of budget? Is this like some unforeseen huge expense that the building suddenly threw at the library? And I mean, even though you've touched on all of those issues, there doesn't seem to be any, you know, I can't pin my finger down and say that's the cause of the shortfall, other than the fact that you've been operating on a budget that has not really changed significantly for a very long time, and the expenses have continued to go up. And you've been, in the past, the library's been able to rely on that savings that was built up over the first several years that the library was in existence. And that, I mean, I can even remember, I've been on the council 6.5 years, I can remember when Jean presented, you know, I don't have the clearest memory, as my fellow councilors can tell you, but I do remember repeatedly when he would present, he would always say, you know, we're balancing our budget, but he would talk about the benefit of this savings account. So like it didn't send off alarms in my mind at the time, that there was like a hidden problem behind it, because you were dipping into a savings account to never have to ask for more funding for the library. And that was sort of, you know, gentlemanly applause was given to say, well, that's well done, that's well managed. And I don't mean to say that in a critical way, but what I'm saying is that it hid a fundamental problem that was on a trajectory that I didn't see. And I regret that. I regret that we didn't look under the hood a little more carefully and say, well, okay, this can't go on forever. We can't keep dipping into these savings and masking a problem that's fundamental to the long-term sustainability of the library. Anyway, I'm just saying that for the sake of anyone who's listening in the public, that I don't think we can point our finger of blame anywhere really, except the fact that this is a well-run library that's doing good for the community under a reasonable budget, reasonable expenses. I mean, some are a little higher, some are a little lower, but I don't see anything alarming. Absolutely nothing that says, oh, this is mismanaged and we need to fix this, that, or the other. What I see is that you've been having to be more and more creative, but you're running out of creative options, because actually maybe you know, the creativity was always in the savings. It was just plugging the leaks as they were coming along.
I hate for anyone to get the impression that during those years when we were doing it was just like, hey, let's add position, hey, let's do all this stuff, let's just add all this stuff. If you look at that the operating budget, which is the budget we would have that kind of control over, it stays last 10 years, like it's just really even, that we're not pulling in a lot more there. And as you can see, like we haven't added a lot of staff. So some of the shortfall is because of that revenue decrease that we experienced. So that's going to augment what we're looking at. And I also started out a lot for a long time trying to find those places where the increases came in. Some of it's personnel. And yeah.
Well, ultimately, it feels like to me it's a question of whether or not, I mean, you could argue that it's all fluff, right? You could say, well, we don't really need any of this. But then you really have to ask yourself if you don't believe in, whether you believe in a public library. And if you don't believe that that's a valuable function, then yeah, it's all fluff. You should cut all of it. You should use the building for something else. But if it's going to be a library, we have to fund it like a public library.
And I do appreciate that no one is trying to shut down our library right now. But except for,
I was just gonna say, I actually applaud Carla. This is not her favorite activity, right? And she really did come into this situation and recognized it, and she easily could have continued to push it under the rug and deal with the situation. But she's looking long-term. She's being straight up honest and she's saying, I have a duty here and it's time to balance this budget. It's time to be honest with everybody. That was the wrong term. Not that there was ever any dishonesty. Reality. It's time to face reality instead of. Anyway, it's a courageous place that you're in. And as a library board, obviously, we champion you in this place and appreciate your eyes to the reality of the situation instead of just keep moving forward in denial.
I think something what it looks like is amounts we've been giving more library to the community than they've been paying for. And so the question is, are they willing to make this adjustment to get us so that we can continue providing the services at the level that we've been working at? Or if we want to lower that, and if our community wants less services, less service hours, if that's, we just need to be, the community needs to pay for the library that it's getting. And whether that means you're bringing, giving us the money that we're asking for, we think we can keep things where they're at, with corrections every few years when that is needed. But this, though I wouldn't personally say like it's a huge increase. This is a decent increase. It's 10% of the budget. It is an increase. It is not the kind of increase that I anticipate needing regularly. I think more, and the board has said this to me as we were talking last year, overall, I said $500,000 is gonna get us to where we need to do. And we wanted to do it in little increments. And the building cost is what set that up, that we didn't have 4 or 5 years to build up to this correction to maintain the services. So those things, all came together to put us in this situation. It is a correction. And yeah.
Well, Carla, thank you. I think all the statistics with comparing the other local libraries is fantastic. There's no doubt. You've provided a lot of information because we're getting a budget time. And there's issues I think in how things were done in the past, but you've corrected that, acknowledged it, and there's nothing concerns me in what's being done. And I think you're working exceptionally with the resources you have. Thank you. Any other comments? We are out of time technically. I know staff needs to get home. Any more comments? Right, thank you, Carla. All right. Oh, we have another presentation. All right, a presentation regarding state library standards. This is presented by Carla Rothman. Kara, sorry.
Thanks for your patience, so I can set up. I just wanted to introduce myself really quickly. My name is Marilee Cannon. I'm at the State Library. I'm the Development Program Manager. And I'm here with my boss, Kara Rothman, who is the State Librarian. Mostly my presentation today is to hopefully answer some questions. I think that Carla answered all of them. But I also have some data to share with you in terms of review standards, benchmarks, and quality libraries. And what I really hope today is that we are here to help you make the very best decision for your community, no matter what that decision is. So first of all, I was kind of asked this question about core services. And we do have a definition. Part of it is through Utah code. And it's just that a library is established and maintained by a city governing body or a county. And then we have a few criteria. So there is an organized collection. There's paid staff. There's a schedule in which services of the staff are available to the public. There's a facilities, and the library is supported in whole or in part by public funds. I was asked a question about like overall budget. And we do have in our trustee manual, this rule of thumb. And this is something that can be found across the nation, a very simple breakdown of the budget. That 60 to 80% should be spent on personnel, 10 to 20% on materials, and the balance for all other expenses. And I pulled this from Carla's annual report that's on her website. And you can see that she is well within that range. Salaries at 62%, collections at 9%. So this is looking at staff expenditures, again, one of those core services and that short list that I gave at the beginning. Last year in fiscal year 23, Provo Library reported that 61.11% of its budget was spent on staff. And you can see this is the list of all the libraries in the state. And you can see where Provo lands, and about 72% of libraries in Utah spend more on staff. And Carla described that the reason why is from the part-time staff. Another core service is your collection. And you can see that Provo Library reported spending 12% of its budget on collections. And you can see here that about 40% more library, 40% of libraries in Utah spend more. The facility, the library building itself is part of the core services. Provo Library down here in the yellow is the second largest library in the state. The only other one that's bigger, as Carla mentioned, is the Salt Lake City Public Library. But you can also see all the libraries that are marked in blue are system libraries. So there's multiple branches, and even combined, all their square footage is this last column here. Provo Library is still very much at the top. Only a few others that even all the combined is larger. And as Carla mentioned, when you have more floors and more nooks and crannies, you do need the staff to make that part of the library run. Next, I was just going to go over really quickly our library standards and benchmarks. So the first part of this is standards, and I guess I should back up and say, I was asked why standards only apply to libraries that are serving areas less than 50,000. From what I am aware, this decision was made a couple of decades ago, and at the time, the small libraries were the priority. But I can tell you that now, Kara and I have actively been meeting with library directors across the state in these large systems, in these large libraries or these large populations, so that we can bring them into recertification. We think it's important. And actually started the conversation with Chandra, who was Kara's predecessor. So when we jump into these standards, we're just looking at like the very, very bare minimum. It's usually being in compliance with the code. So the first one is the library has a board of 5 to 9 members. Standard 2, they're held in compliance with Open Meetings Act. Standard 3, there's a strategic plan. It's informed by the board and staff, as well as a community assessment process. Standard 4, they have a current online internet access policy and they filter according to their policy. All board members have a formal training. Next, administration, standard 6 and 7. The names of all library board members are available to the public. Standard 7, the library is up to date on required reports. Standard 8 is a maintenance of effort. So that is the percentage of change in average operational expenditures from the past 3 years prior to the previous fiscal year and has not decreased more than 10%. So that is basically, oh, I lost it. I have the calculation up there. Sorry about that. So it's a calculation, and if y'all need it, I can pull it for you. I don't have it memorized. But it is a calculation that we run. And this basically the whole point of that is that we're looking to show that the level of local funding remains relatively constant from year to year.
Could I ask a question about that?
Yes.
So if we cut, but we're talking about a 10% cut, so we would be right on the edge of that, if that's what.
Right, if we held Provo to these standards and they made that cut, they probably would not maintain that maintenance buffer.
I wouldn't have been in compliance if you consider the money was coming out of that fund too. No,
What?
the fact they were pulling from that account versus the money coming into taxes.
I'm not sure that would have made a difference, would
No,
it?
she's saying that she's not sure if we meet standard number 9, if 65% of their operating revenues came from the tax, or if we were supplementing the operating revenues from the fund.
No, I'm talking about standard number 8.
But
Right.
also in
So-
there, the idea that
It just says local funding remains relatively constant
Right.
from year to year.
No, we may have violated number 9 in the past, but these cuts would make us violate number 8 now or in the future. I think that's what we're all saying.
Yeah, but we're not held to those standards at this point.
Right.
Because we're too big.
Yes.
Okay.
And I should say at least 65%, it's okay if there's more.
Okay.
Personnel, this is standards 10 and 10, 11, and 12. So the library director has an ALA accredited library degree or has library management training through Utah State Library. We do offer coursework. Standard 11, the library director and staff receives professional training to enhance work abilities. Standard 12, the library has skilled technical support. Next, we're coming into access and services. The library maintains a website that provides contact information, a program schedule, a library catalog, access to Utah State Library resources, and a way to request assistance. Standard 14, there are required open operating hours, and they're based on the library service population. We don't have something set up for the population that Provo serves. But we do ask that libraries 50,000 and under take in consideration their evening and weekend hours, simply because those are times that we have found that people who are getting off of work or work Monday through Friday, that's the only time that they can come is Saturday or in the evening. Materials and resources is standard 15. The library has a collection development policy approved by the library board. Standard 16 is technology. A technology checklist must be completed for each library location and technology plan is in place. So the checklist is going to include things like availability of public computers, the availability of printer and scanner, technology assistance, adequate internet connection, wireless internet available. And this is the last standard. Standard 17, a facility inspection checklist has been completed annually, and the checklist is going to include things like workplace safety, fire safety, equipment safety, and general safety. So that brings us to benchmarks. Currently, we only run benchmarks for libraries that are 50,000 and under. And the reason why we do that is to ensure a continued quality of service. Benchmarks are targets that indicate library support by the community and library support by the city or county. The benchmark for each target is set at the level that 90% of Utah's libraries currently meet or exceed, meaning libraries under 50,000. To recertify libraries would need to meet or exceed the benchmark in 7 of the 12 categories. So I did run a scenario for Provo, and if USL benchmarked all libraries in Utah, this would be how Provo Library measures. So this first benchmark is just library visits. And in 2023, Provo reported that they had 505,981 visits. And that puts them just in between the 50th and 70th percentile. So they did not have, sorry, I should go back and describe the colors. So first of all, they did not have anything marked in the red. So red would be below the 10th percentile of all the libraries in Utah. Yellow simply means it wasn't gathered, it wasn't reported. And green is that they're above the 70th percentile in the state of Utah. So we look at the benchmark, number 1, library visits. They meet, they've gone above the 10th percentile and they're somewhere in between that 50th and 70th percentile. Benchmark number 2 is circulation of physical materials. They're just over 1.1 million, which as you'll see, the 70th percentile was just a little, yes, please. So if
if we're between the 50th and 70th percentile, what does that mean? Does that mean that we would be good in standing? Or does that mean
Yes.
we'd be low in standing, or what does
You'd
that
be
mean?
good in standing. So green and clear means you're in good standing. Anything in red, which I mentioned again, Provo Library doesn't have anything in red. That would indicate to us that there's something there that can be done, you know, some brainstorming. Sometimes it can be something as simple as like implementing a marketing plan. Benchmark number 3 is circulation of electronic materials. That is also in the green, above the 70th percentile. Benchmark number 4 is the turnover rate of physical materials. And we have it as a percentage. I actually like to think of it as a decimal, so that's about 4.9. That means that all your physical materials went out about 5 times, which is awesome. Nice job, Provo Library, curating your collection. And the same can be said with their electronic materials. Basically, all your electronical materials went out 1.3 times, which is awesome. And you can see it's well above the 70th percentile. Benchmark number 6, internet terminal users, 37,000, puts you right in between the 50th and 70th. Again, really great. We have a lot of libraries that have trouble collecting benchmark number 7, which is Wi-Fi users, and we're actually going to be discontinuing that.
We did just update our Wi-Fi and we can now plug that
And
together.
now you're just in time. Internally, you can find it really great. Benchmark number 8, attendance at programs. So again, we talked a little bit about this and Carla was really surprised, but I think that the reason why is because there are branches. This is technically in competition with Salt Lake City and Salt Lake County. Have large buildings and big branches and a lot of staff, so. But still incredibly well, almost at the 50th percent. Benchmark number 9, local operating expenditures, 3.9 million. Puts her right in between, puts Provo Library right in between the 50th and 70th percentile. 12% is the collection, percent of dollars spent on the collection. So 12%, it's right in the middle. And then the staffing levels, 59 FTE. So that's right in the middle between the 50th and the 70th. And the number of programs, almost 2,000, to be above the 70th would be over 4,000. That brings us to the quality library designation. Quality library designation indicates that the library is an active, involved, and vital part of the community. It provides resources and services beyond the 4 walls of the library with dedicated outreach to residents. Quality libraries demonstrate that they actively respond with solutions to their unique community needs. A library may seek quality library designation by meeting 6 or more of the quality library criteria. So I thought we could just really quickly run through what it would look like for Provo right now. So criteria number 1, the library reaches beyond its physical space to provide collections or services to community organizations. Provo does that. Criteria 2, meet or exceed the 70th percentile of 5 or more key statistical measures. Provo doesn't meet that criteria right now. Criteria 3, the library's website includes the following. They meet that. So we have 2 so far. Quality library criteria 4 through 6. The library is a proactive in obtaining materials for use based on user requests. Provo does that. Criteria 5, the library encourages all staff to participate in Utah's library community, and I realized that this wasn't updated. Let me explain to you exactly what that is. Criteria number 5. The library pays Utah Library Association dues for 50% of the full-time staff plus the director. So they do not meet that right now. Then criteria 6, the library participates in engaging programming that goes beyond the standard offerings of the library. Provo does that.
We meet that.
Criteria 7. Oh,
Sorry,
sorry.
quick question.
Yeah.
So this said about outreach programs, Carla, did we do any of that prior to having the van?
We did, like, we did stories in the park even without the van, like we were getting outside, plus we did home delivery to people who were homebound. We've been doing that for 20+ years, so there were things that we were doing. We were able to bring home collection. We would bring select collections to like some of the retirement homes and trade things out, but it was, yeah, what we can carry in a bag instead of several cars.
I go to like back to school nights and STEM nights.
Criteria 7, the library has targeted staff training based on the library's needs. Criteria 8, the library engages in a collaboration with another library community organization, local expert, Project Read, I think was that. So we're at 6. And then the last 2, the library demonstrated an innovative approach to providing library services either inside or outside the library building. I think Provo. Yep. And then criteria 10, staff excluding the director, their training hours exceed the required amount by 50%. I would think that Provo meets that. I know Carla really encourages professional development. So this means that at this moment, if we did this, Provo would be a quality library, which I will remind you is an active, involved, and vital part of the community. Last I said questions. Yes, please.
So how long do you anticipate it'll be until there are standards for libraries over 50,000?
We're hoping in the next year.
Yeah, I think our goal would not to be, we may do kind of an optional first year just to get the larger libraries adjusted to it. And most of the libraries collect this data, but we wouldn't want to just dump another task on their plate. They got a lot to do. So I think it would be, and that may help us work out some kinks and just get all those libraries on board. And then we would proceed as kind of a required within the next 2 fiscal years from now, I would say.
So this data is what we collect already for our state library report. I spend hours and hours and hours every fall collecting all of it, so. But I will do more. So theoretically, we would have to meet these standards in 2 years.
Yeah. Yes, and what those standards do is it allows you to qualify for state and federal grant money.
So let's say we did cut 10%, that really wouldn't matter.
Right, because
in
it's
2
that
years from now,
average.
because it'll be, okay, yep. It'll more matter what we do in the next 2 years.
Any other questions? Yeah.
So would this open us our Provo Library for more grants that it can't get right now because they don't have this designation? Or would it just mean that in the future, we have to have this designation to continue to get the grants that we have access to now?
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you, Marley. Any other questions? I think we're good.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you.
If there are no objections, we will now adjourn the joint meeting of the Provo Municipal Council and the Provo Library Board. by unanimous
Recording stopped.
So we first
nominate us.